It's February the 15th, 2023, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off right and introduce the players. Hey, I am Jarisar, esports aficionado. I almost messed that up.
Hey guys, I'm Big Moran. I'm a solo shuffle enthusiast.
Hey, and I'm TreesapJake, and I love shamans.
Well, at least somebody loves shamans.
Yeah, at least somebody does. Blizzard doesn't.
Oh, that's not true. Okay, I can't. Maybe. They do love assassination rogues, though. Just ask Twitter.
They do indeed. They also love solo shuffle, and they hate 3v3.
I'm conflicted on how I feel about that whole conversation. You know, it's because I really enjoy solo shuffle, and if I would have the ability to play 3v3, I would really enjoy playing 3v3. And so I don't think they need to be this like exclusive thing, and I don't think one is necessarily killing the other. And so I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think about this whole conversation about solo shuffle activity potentially cutting into 3v3?
I think it's a very good question.
So I was thinking about this, and I was trying to figure out. It's like a Venn diagram almost. It's like there's the different player types, there's the different gaming types, and then there's really the amount of effort that people are able to put into the game to do those things, to get their goals. And then of course there's always, general skill level, right? And I find you'd almost have to make it would be such a complex Venn diagram. You almost have to create several different ones depending on the different player type archetype you're looking at. But I would say if you look back at history, you look at the amount of player activity that was in twos, which was arguably the easiest arena game style to get into, or really the rated game style to get into, because you just need one other player and boom, off you go, right? Mm-hmm. And questionably skill, right? Because you're only dealing with two. You're dealing with just your cooldowns and a friend's or another teammates, and you're only dealing with two other players and their counters. And then obviously then the difficulty would increase to threes, because now you're trying to line so many others, two other players plus your time schedule, two other players and what they want and their skill level and then you had the 5v5s, which was probably the lowest, and then rated BGs, which was I'd say on the casual level was fairly active, but I don't think the amount of player activity in 10v10 ever equated to the same as what you're seeing in arena. Solo shuffle being the simplest is because now you don't have to worry about aligning yourself to anybody else's skill level. The system does it for you. You don't have to align yourself to anybody else's work schedule or aptitude or gaming schedule, because the system does it for you. So it makes sense that these other systems, these other rated systems that were already in place, and people gravitated to the easiest one to achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve, arguably twos, had the most. And now the easiest of it all, solo shuffle, is getting all the attention.
What's interesting too is if you look at activity in 2v2, it's very low right now. And in the past it was much higher. And
well, you can't queue solo shuffle and twos and threes at the same time.
Right. And I just think there's something to be said in this conversation, regardless how you feel about solo shuffle, regardless how, if you want threes to be the main bracket. I think certainly there's a bit of an accessibility question in there somewhere, like a structural question, like how, if it's this difficult to find partners. Okay, like my belief is, because I know people are saying, I know they recently made that post actually yesterday that they're going to start, they did not have inflation in 3v3 so far this season, and now they're going to, inflation's going to start kicking in at week 10. I don't know if that will actually change anyone's incentives. I truly believe it will have very little effect, if any, on rated 3v3. And I think there's just kind of this disparity between the top 1% of the community and then like the everyone else, because certainly there's a social aspect to queuing WoW. Like you need to have some sort of social capital to play 3v3. It's not really that easy to just randomly find a good team, right? You kind of have to have an established group of players. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the goal now should be to try to funnel people from solo shuffle into 3v3 with some sort of funneling system. Maybe after the round you could have like an opportunity to add people on real ID or something, right? If you could have like a voting system, like thumbs up, I enjoyed playing with this player, and maybe you could have the option to add them or something. Because I really think no amount of inflation, unless it's like an absurd amount of inflation, would get people to stop playing solo shuffle and start playing 3v3 again. Because yeah, it's just, as you said, everything aligns itself in the bracket. You don't have to worry about all these external things. You just play.
So let's be clear. The only reason why inflation exists is to make players feel good about themselves and feel like they're progressing over weeks, when really they've stalled out. It turned a 1,500 player into an 1,800 player over weeks of time because of inflation. Because they move the median from 15 to 18. That's essentially their goal step. And the reason behind that is then your 2,400 player then reaches 2,700 player, right? It essentially should go the same way. And then that would overtake anybody that made the people who play a ludicrous amount in the first week and are able to get some crazy level, and then they stop playing, right? So it allows for the system, it allows for the players to overtake those who created a high rating and then just sat on it for weeks. Yeah. That's why the inflation exists. So you are right, is that adding inflation now is not going to all of a sudden take a bunch of players and go, oh, I'm going to play threes now because there's inflation. No, they're still going to play solo because it's the new thing. I mean, it really is. It's the new Flash, right? And it's really super easy to get into. And what it means then is that the people that have been sitting at hard stuck at 1,600 are now going to be able to get to 1,700 or 1,800 over weeks, and they'll actually start seeing some progression because the inflation will push their rating to that level.
I think the big thing that's kind of like point and case of it all is the fact that you're finding that solo shuffle is allowing people that may not have been sort of like rank 1 level to kind of come up and push their way up, because quite frankly that sort of player base has often gatekept who it plays with. We've had, for example, Nethy on here before, who never really played at that level, is now playing with almost every single rank 1 you can even name from EU, because of the opportunity to do that from solo shuffle. So there's an opportunity there that people have had because that exists, and obviously people are finding that it's easier that way to kind of just push the rating that they want in that bracket, because, as we say, you're not reliant on it. It's the opportunity to kind of go out there and either meet new people or just find yourself and find where you sit and figure out your own strategies for it. That's its own kettle of fish. And I think that's always going to be a big driving point that threes necessarily doesn't really have. And twos especially. I mean, twos is probably one of the most difficult brackets because of the fact that it's just so, sometimes with the metas, especially in the last couple expansions, it's been so aggressively imbalanced in that regard. So it's not always the most fun bracket to queue up. Whereas threes is maybe a bit more meta, and solo shuffle seems to be really kind of working out as it is a lot of the time. It's potluck. I have a friend of mine that really spent a long time queuing mage in solo shuffle and going up and down from sort of like 2,300 down to 2,100 again, just because of really bad lobbies, and then eventually got that 2-4 and beyond. Just from breaking that bracket finally. And there's a sense of achievement there. But actually, to be honest with you, the thing that resonated the most with me was what Big was saying earlier, which was that if we had an opportunity to do what League does, which is like give thumbs up to people that we've played with that we think were cool and nice, as a kind of like a post game sort of feedback, and have the opportunity to add them or whatever, that would kind of maybe drive a bit more into that threes bracket anyway, or just the finding friends, because that's what we used to do. I mean, most of the guys I queue with now I found at the end of BFA. I just kept playing.
I think that's all. It'll be good. I definitely think that there is iteration to be done to improve the system as a whole. not just a solo. Uh, hopefully all the devs that listen to us, they'll take our input and implement something. If not, we'll see what they come up with. I'm sure they know. I mean, they see Twitter. I mean, the number of people that tag Holinka on Twitter, I'm sure he sees everything. So, speaking of seeing everything, though, I want to see what Big came up with for the Need, Greed, and Pass this week.
This likely won't be a clean fight, so keep your distance, eh?
I'm getting better transitions again. I'll say that.
I'm going to trust you on that one.
All right. On that, Big, what was your pick for Need, Greed, and Pass for us to do to talk about?
Yeah, so since we're doing an episode on Ele Shamans, I know Jake alluded to this earlier, but a key enemy for Elemental Shaman is Rogue, and currently Assassination Rogue seems to be on everyone's radar as a spec that maybe is an outlier. I have kind of mixed opinions about Assassination Rogues and Rogues in general. I think it's a very volatile class just to begin with. But I think there's a few different ways you could potentially nerf rogues. So there's been a few things in conversation. People have been spitballing ideas. So we're gonna need Greed and Pass on different ways to nerf Assassination Rogue in PvP. So the first way would be a reduction of the duration of Kidney Shot. I know this has been something that people have been talking about for a while. Sea-Doo's been making a lot of tweets about kidney shot lately, so I'm sure you've seen some of those. So there's the kidney shot duration. That's one way to nerf Rogue. The other way to nerf Rogue would be targeting maybe its damage or healing reduction. I know there was actually in a recent set of hotfixes, or it might have been the 10.0.5 patch, they did patch some healing reduction stacking between, I believe it was Deathmark and Hemotoxin, were kind of stacking. So rogues had 59% total healing reduction. So that's definitely something on people's radar. And the third way, which is less obvious, is their mobility. So assassination rogues in Dragonflight actually have 2 charges of Shadow Step, and their Shadow Step actually has a 33% shorter cooldown whenever it's used against a target that has Groat active on them. So pretty much they have 2 charges of Step and a reduced cooldown of Step. I think it brings it down to like a 20-second cooldown, but I could be wrong about that. So we have to nerf one of those things. We either nerf the duration of Kidney Shot, we target its damage or healing reduction, something, its pressure, or we nerf its mobility. So which one of those things are we going to be needing to nerf, and which one of these things are we going to be greeting to nerf? I'll start with Jake, since he's the shaman.
Right. So I actually have my own thoughts on this, as everyone does, obviously. I've actually, as soon as you were talking about it, I knew exactly what I was going to go for. So I'm going to need on the damage / healing reduction. The reason why is because in particular, I'm going to be calling out Shiv. Shiv in general is going to be the one for me, because I think if we nerf Shiv, that's a major cooldown that I think causes most of the problems. I feel like personally, the way that Assassination Rogue becomes so intense is from Shiv. And there are moments where I'm like unable to do anything, or unless you've got like a hard immunity, like an ice block or something along those lines, it can feel like it's almost like just counterproductive to do anything. So that for me, I'm going to need that. So big nerfs to Shiv would be my big need. I'm then going to say I'm probably going to say their mobility, because I want rogues to be punished for making mistakes, especially assassination rogues. I know subs are a whole different kettle of fish, but it's their mobility can feel like they can kind of just get away with doing anything. So that for me would be the greed, and I'm probably going to pass on the kidney shot, because I personally think kidney's a big part of the rogue toolkit, and I'm not massively fussed by it. I don't think it's too much of a it doesn't feel like a problematic thing for me, especially with the CC reduction that we have in general. I don't feel that doesn't feel too oppressive for me. The others I think are the major problem.
Very nice.
All right.
Garrison, what about you?
this is tough. I think because it kind of depends on the game mode. Like if you're talking solo shuffle, where we were talking before, how mobility is really the thing that makes the difference in solo shuffle. Um, it makes a difference in other parts of the game too, but I think that's the part that really seems to make Assassination Rogue stand out. And then the damage. I think overall, like just listening to the masses, if Twitter had its way, I'd say the need would be damage reduction, and it'd probably be like in the order of 50% if you from how people are reacting on Twitter. Honestly, I'm gonna go with the need on the kidney though. I think the duration of kidney would that coupled with all the rest of the CC that a rogue plus its companions can do is part of the thing that makes it so toxic, if you will, to play against. Is that feeling that you're always locked down, you can't really do anything, you're just sitting there watching people die or die yourself. So I'm actually going to need on the duration of kidney. I think a slowdown on that would be great. Agreed on the mobility, since I do agree mobility is a bit much. Trying to chase down a rogue or lock one down is somewhat difficult. And then finally, I'll have to pass on the damage and the healing reduction. I think the healing reduction has what's happened already is enough. I think nothing further has to happen, and I'm not so sure. I'm not so sold that an overall damage nerf is actually the issue. Actually, the answer. Maybe a little tuning on some of the abilities, but not like an overall shut it down. Yeah. What about you, Big, though? What are your thoughts? You're the one that created this. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we all have different answers. I'm going to go with a need on nerfing rogue mobility. I think just in general, there needs to be some maybe reconsideration on melee mobility in general. And I've been playing a lot of Boomkin in solo shuffle lately. And it's crazy because you'd think, oh, Boomkin is very mobile, range DPS. I should have no problem like getting away from people. But these days, you play a caster and you have melee on you like 24/7. And I think it's particularly difficult when you have such mobile melee DPS classes because you can't really navigate the game in the way you kind of want to as a ranged DPS. Like, you want to create distance, you want to do all this stuff, you want to kite or whatever. And you can't really do that these days. You just kind of need to sit there and tank damage, which I think is not very fun. And I think if you were to target rogues' mobility, you would kind of passively nerf their defense a little bit and passively nerf their offense without being too punishing. Because I don't think like, and Venuki today was like talking about how like, why aren't these rogues dying? Like, apparently rogues are squishy. Why is no one killing them in the AWC? Well, I think that's kind of missing the point. I think rogues on paper are very squishy. Like, I don't think they're like tanks. But I think it's right now their mobility kind of allows them to, as Jake said, like take like too many risks. Like they don't really get punished for overextending, especially with 2 charges of Shadow Step. And a lot of them play with like the mobility or maneuverability PvP talent where they have a freedom sprint. Sprint's a 60-second cooldown. So they just kind of like have way too much mobility these days. So I'm gonna nerf their mobility because I think they'll just like passively nerf everything else. I'm gonna greed on the damage. I'd nerf a little bit of their healing reduction, and maybe this is just like my healer bias a little bit. I'm fine with their normal passive healing reduction. I have no problem with that. But currently, like when Azerogues press Death Mark, especially as a Resto Druid, it's almost impossible to. It's very difficult to heal through Death Mark currently as a Druid, which is ironic because like Druids have some of the best healing, but you pretty much need like a big cooldown, like a pain suppression or something else to kind of live through Death Mark. And you can't just there's like almost no chance you're going to power through it with healing. So I think I'd target Death Mark, and then I'm going to pass on the duration of Kidney Shot just because I just think it's like an iconic rogue ability, and I think it's very fun from the rogue's perspective, it's, what they want to be doing. They want to be pressing Kidney Shot, and I think CC setups are just inherently a bit fun for the game. I'd rather have CC than no CC.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Definitely think I definitely think like I think people go to kidney shot as the usual sort of like go-to enemy, but with the reductions of stuff I've never felt it's too bad. Like for example, a lot of the time I pretty much can sit through a kidney and bomb because I know that it's not going to last as long and I can come out and press something. Whereas I think in previous expansions, yeah, it did feel quite oppressive. But I think if we have this idea of like 15% less CC going forwards, then it's not too much of a problem. So, and I think yeah, but that's kind of, as you're right. Like you don't want to ruin the class, right? You don't want to ruin everything from them, even though they are really annoying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to remind everybody, now that you've heard our ideas, don't forget that you can also give us what your need, greed, and pass versions are. Head on over to the Discord. You'll find a thread there. You can tell us your choice. If you want to see the kidney duration reduced, if you want to see damage and healing reduction nerfed, or their mobility. And I'd love to see that. In the meantime, we're going to talk about what is happening in the next few weeks for WoW PvP events.
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
All right. Couple. I mean, there's the boilerplate stuff. There's that we've already talked about. There's the Blizzard events. The AWC Cups have finished. We're now moving into the MDI, the Mythic Dungeon International, with Group A starting this weekend, and then that's going to go through Group B, Group C, and the Last Stand over the following weeks. With that, the Last Stand signups are now open. So if you missed your opportunity to do the time trials for the original and you still want to get in there to do that for the banner, you can. And then following that is going to be the AWC Gauntlet, which I got educated on this. Glad they talked about it actually during the Cup. But so how this is going to work is the 8th and the 7th team, based on the point standings after the 4 Cups, are going to battle against each other. And the winner of that is going to battle against the 6th place. And the winner is going to battle against the 5th. And the winner is going to battle against the 4th. And whoever wins that is going to take the 4th spot at the grand finals. And then the top 3 obviously already have their spot, so they get to sit back in the stream and watch the battles happen and cheer on their favorite team that they want to see at the grand finals as well. So I think that's going to be a very interesting version. I think it's going to be a little bit different than what we've seen before, but I also think it's going to be a good show. And then following that, we're going to have the grand finals on the 1st of April, and the MDI grand finals are going to happen sometime in the future. No date known. One other event that we know of is Flarkness. Our friend Flarkness, the DK, is hosting another one of his solo queue 3v3 tournaments. So this, you don't need any rating. You don't need to have a team. All you have to do is just sign up. Be there online, go over to his Discord, be on his stream. He does it up in game through the LFG system. You show up there. He makes the teams based out of who's there. Averages out all the CR. So if you're a 1600 player, chances are you're going to be matched against an 1800 and a 2300 player, and the 3 of you are going to go for it. So literally anybody can win. And yeah. And so this time, one of his community members has put up a $2,000 prize pool. Generally, these go up because the community also ends up supplying some more throughout the weeks ahead. But yeah, if you have a chance for that, that is going to be happening this weekend, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to bring it up just to make sure because I forgot to do that ahead of time. And it is, it is this Saturday, the 18th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So, and if you don't want to compete, you can always just go to his Twitch channel and watch the show. Because talk about, we've talked about all the comps. You guys have all watched the AWC and seen what comps there are. These are completely different because it's completely random. So you can see
solo shuffle.
Yeah, it's basically solo shuffle in that way. So yeah, that's it for events that we're aware of. But let's get into TreesapJake's brain here and do the subject analysis and find out why Ele Shaman need a buff.
I'm gonna light you up, sweet cheeks.
Yes,
So
they do.
Jake, why do Ele Shamans need a buff, man?
Listen, they are so severely underrepresented in all factors of WoW, and just they are Blizzard's least favorite child, probably the least touched ranged class after Boomkin. Um, I say that the Boomkins get touched a lot in PvE. So no, but obviously, jokes aside, shamans in general, you don't see a lot of love on them, especially from Blizzard, and that I think that's really represented in the enhancement changes or lack thereof. You don't see much of it, and it's one of the great things about being an Ele Shaman main is that they don't tend to touch us. We get to like a good point or like a playable point, and then nothing happens. There's been very little in Dragonflight personally that I've seen beyond sort of adjusting two set and elemental blast things. Enhancement has had a lot of like a massive nerf bat taken to it and then just left. And I think, as I said, Ellie just tends to it has a few changes and then just stays kind of the way it has always been. And that's kind of the way it tends to go, which is both a blessing and a curse because you start an expansion and your spec is the way it is, and then it stays that way, and then either it's really good and then nothing really happens, or it's kind of okay and then nothing really happens, and that kind of is the Elemental Shaman lifestyle.
Yeah, I think shamans are kind of interesting because they're always like strong, right? They always feel like Ele shamans always feel like decently strong, but never like insanely busted. I mean, I know that there's a period of time in the early expansion where people thought they were absolutely insane, but then Blizzard was, as you said, the quick to address that with the 2-set nerf, and then I believe some nerf to primordial wave lava burst or something. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for a while, the shamans had kind of like the best of both worlds. They had like the single target execute with the earth shocks, and then they had like massive AoE damage. And they kind of just like, okay, can't have both of those things being broken. So now they're going to be just slightly worse.
Yeah.
I've always been a fan. Like as much as I despise like some of the some of the abilities that shamans, they're just very disruptive, right? It's just by nature, shamans are always very disruptive. So it's really frustrating to play against them. But I've always thought they're kind of like an honest DPS class. Like you kind of know what you're gonna get. Like even if they have these like slot machine tendencies where they can just like high roll procs. I don't really mind that. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Exactly.
But yeah, compared to other things, I think there's other things that are infinitely more frustrating, I think, to play against.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So,
And that's obviously bias, but
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, go on.
I just kind of like, so I know we went into Ele Shaman pretty good back in Shadowlands. Is this playstyle still the same? Like, is it still? I mean, you have your utility. Obviously, you have your different totems depending on what you pick for your talents. But is it still just lava, lava, lava?
I mean, it's lava, lava, lava all day long. It's, to be honest with you, the era of I kind of, how I split it up is that back in BFA, Ele Shaman was kind of weird. You kind of did a lot about there was your lava burst did nothing. It was a filler ability. Lava burst was a filler ability in BFA, and a lot of your damage came from like Stormkeeper and Earthshock, which was a different kind of play style. And then going into Shadowlands, they did the best thing ever, which was they were like, actually, you know what? We'll reduce the amount of chance for instant lava burst you get, but will up lava burst damage. So every time you press lava burst, it felt exactly how it used to feel, and you would kind of chunk people, and that was awesome. And then they took a lot of the damage out of lightning bolt instead, which I wasn't, that didn't mind me too much. You still had Stormkeeper, you still had a bit of Earthshock, but Lava Burst was where it was doing it. So it kind of returned to that Lava Burst focused style, and we've continued that. So in Dragonflight, you've got a lot of the abilities that we used to have in Shadowlands that is now sort of a kind of baked into our kit. So it's very fun to play. I've always thought that Elemental Shaman since Shadowlands has been in the best condition it's ever been, or at least in one of the better conditions it's been. It's a very fun play style. I very much enjoy it. It's, I never am bored, and whenever I move away from Shaman and I come back to it, I'm always like, this is home. This feels amazing to me, and I know that every single person that I've spoken to that have picked up Elemental Shaman have always gone, this feels so good to play, and it does, and it feels amazing until you step into the arena and you play against any sort of vaguely competent melee, especially rogues, and obviously we'll talk about rogues tonight, who just dismantle you, and there's not much you can do with that, and that's just purely part of just kit. So you have to learn how to play a specific way into every single melee.
That sounds
I
frustrating,
think
though.
It is, but
I
it's
think I
but like,
think. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, go, no, you go.
I was gonna say, like, I think a core feature of Shaman in recent expansions is it's a spec that often feels very GCD capped. Like every GCD, you can do something, and like you have all these options. You can do damage, you can use your utility, you can be disruptive. You have infinite options, and I think like being able to navigate that is like the kind of the beauty of Elemental Shaman is you can do so much. You're not limited to one thing. Um, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it's kind of frustrating to play against melee is they kind of just shut off all your options at one time. It's like, oh, well, what do I do now? I'm getting harassed. I can't really do, do I want to focus on damage? Do I need to focus on utility in this moment? You don't really have time to like accurately make like the best and most informed decision when you're just getting like pummeled. But I think that's just, again, one of the nice things about Shaman is you always have an ability to press. You don't have to just spam damage. You have all these options, and I think like Shadow Priest is a very similar thing, right? Uh, you can just focus on doing damage, but then something else is gonna like fall behind, and so it's like there's a beauty in the harmony. You want to harmonize all parts of your toolkit, and I think it's really good for the game and really good for the class when they're able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having played Shadow Priest myself a little bit, like that, that joy in that spec is how much how easy it is to put out your CC if you want to. And I feel like the same is kind of for Elemental Shaman in the sense that you have the ability to have so much utility should you need to. For example, there's nothing better, like there's no better feeling in the world than using grounding totem to the utmost best of your ability, grounding traps, grounding hodges, grounding kicks, grounding any incoming CC, especially the traps and the hodges. Those are, I think, abilities that are notoriously difficult to stop if you or to ground in general. So being able to predict your enemy's movement is a real sign of an outplay in my brain. So whenever I do that, it feels really good to outplay your opponent that way, because in the day and age that we play WoW, there are so many ways for them to guarantee that CC. That the hunters, for example, can scatter you and stun the healer and guarantee that CC should they wish to. So it's a really good feeling in that regard when you actually are able to do it nowadays. So yeah, I think it's a really awesome spec.
I like it. I think looking at the talent tree and looking at just the options in the capstone talents alone goes to show just how difficult this class really is, because there's so many options. I don't think there's another talent tree that has this many options down the tree and at the bottom. I mean, really. And
It's
I think that kind of speaks to just how much is available to this class to do.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of the capstone ones aren't that great.
Oh,
Well, obviously the elemental side of things are better, but in
yeah.
terms of the regular shaman tree, so I've kind of got it open myself. I know that there is a build in which you can go down to take ancestral guidance, which is for the next 10 seconds, 25% of your damage and healing is converted into healing on up to 3 nearby injured party members or raid members. And I know that there is a build that way where you can go down that healing stream totem path, and kind of buff your healing and buff your general healing. And what you can do is, if let's say you're duking it out with another sort of wizard comp, and
Mhm.
because of how volatile wizard standoffs are at the minute, like with frost mages and destro locks being so strong, let's say you're playing lock shaman into mage lock, for example, and you want to kind of tee it off. What can work quite well there is if you pop that and you start blasting, they will not be able to keep up with the fact that you are healing, your healer's healing, and actually you kind of able to kind of out damage them, out turret them in the open. I suppose out PvE them in that sense. So I know that that's an option, but otherwise you'd never go down to the cap totem. So the cap
The capstone.
Capstone.
yeah, that's it. Capstone. I couldn't remember the word. Cap totem was in my head. You can see I play shaman. The capstones of the talent trees, because in my opinion, there's nothing really for PvP that you'd want to take.
Oh.
I mean, the options aren't amazing. So,
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that because I mean, there's the stone skin totem, the tranquil air
mhm,
totem. Those two are tied
mhm.
together. The call of the elements or the creation core. That one I wasn't so sure about.
It's a
Stormkeeper, I thought you'd want to get to though.
so you can get in the elemental tree, you can get to Stormkeeper in pretty much the middle range. You don't really need the second side of it. I mean, I'm sure there are builds that people could test where you could go for that, but as I'm sure we'll talk about with Stormkeeper is a very scripted damage cooldown. So when you know when someone's got it out, let's say you're doing like an Ele mirror,
Mhm.
the enemy Ele or enemy shaman is going to put down grounding totem when they think you're about to line it up, which is usually after an earth shock or after a lava burst. It's very easy to stop that, and you can kick it, you can stop it. Whereas a lot of the other talents that you might go for, in terms of the capstones on the elemental tree, it's all kind of baked into your own toolkit and makes life a lot easier.
Okay. Well then, all right. Well, let's just get into this. Like,
Mhm,
so in the actual talent tree on the left side, then
mhm.
what are you even going for then?
So obviously you kind of start as elemental, you start with chain lightning and lava burst. You obviously want to go for wall, so astral shift is a big thing. I tend to go down the earth elemental down to earth shield and then elemental orbit. And the reason why is elemental orbit allows you to put earth shield and lightning shield on yourself, and therefore you can unleash shield or unleash that sort of
Mhm.
unleash both of them, which knocks an enemy away and then roots them. And that root seems to not DR, as far as I can tell, that much. So it seems to kind of like it's just a very good guaranteed way to kind of get melee off you, which is nice. This is unfortunately changing in 10.0.7, because they are moving certain bits and pieces, which has made me really angry because it's basically a flat nerf to Elemental Shaman.
And
Um,
this was one of the biggest changes going into Dragonflight is in Shadowlands you didn't have a root, and now you have two roots. You
yes,
can knock root and you can earth grab totem, which I think was a
exactly.
pretty big quality of life improvement, right?
Massive quality of life improvement. The way that you can kite melee and just also peel for your teammates is huge. And another point of it is if you think about any map that we, for example, Blade's Edge, Dalaran, even Mugambala, anything like that, you then have the opportunity, especially Blade's Edge, for someone to, to be knocked off, jump back to you, and then knock them off again, should you wish. And that is very big because of, as we talked about, as you said, Big, the mobility creep that we have for melee is exceptional. So, for example, rogues being able to step you twice. If
Yeah,
they
that's
have to
funny.
use
When you get a knock on Blade's Edge bridge these days, it's like they're already to you like before the knock even ended. They're already right back
yeah.
at you. It's kind of
Yeah,
funny.
especially warriors as well. They are the most trigger happy heroic leap people, and the best thing ever is when they get knocked from thunderstorm, they go off, they leap back, and then you just throw them off. And because of how Unleash Shield works, it sort of like knocks them straight away. They get rooted, and you just kind of see them like descend, kind of like Mario when he gets killed, and kind of like he just drops straight down. It's so funny, and then is stuck down there in the route for like a half a second or so, and it's the best thing ever. So you can really sort of screw people's cooldowns that way, and it's a lot of fun. But obviously, we are going to probably be losing that, or rather, not losing it. We're going to have to give up some other things elsewhere in order to take it. So it's a bit of a sad situation, but that is happening.
That sucks.
It does, yes. And then
All right.
obviously going down the tree, you want to go down
So
towards
should we just
Lasso.
stop the podcast right now and start it again after 10:07 comes up and we can talk about all the changes?
Well, I mean, we can, or alternatively, you can go to www.youtube.com/TreesapJake where I can talk about them and you can find all the latest details about. about Elemental Shaman. That's also a
Love it, man.
possibility.
I love it.
Yeah.
You aren't wrong.
Nope.
That's
Um,
okay. So what are we? What are the important ones? What are the highlights? That because we can't talk about every single talent here in this tree. Like there's
of
just too
course.
much. But what
Yeah.
are the highlights? What are the things that are the you must get?
So I think the biggest ones for me is obviously we talked about Elemental Orbit, which is a big one. So definitely go for that. You must go for Lasso. You got to make your way down there for Lasso and Thunderstorm as well. Those are the big ones, and probably Gust of Wind. You want to make your way down there. I mean, Hex. The usual utility stuff. There's a lot of utility baked into the general Shaman tree. Tremor, Hex, Gust of Wind, Thunderstorm, all that sort of stuff. And that kind of tends to be the route that you want to go down. And I think those are the most important ones because, as we've talked about, Elemental Shaman can only use your wall when you're not stunned, when you're under no CC effect. So being able to make a gap and kind of like reduce the amount of damage you're taking whilst also blasting at the same time is kind of a key element of playing. So those kind of ones like Earth Grab, Gust of Wind, Knock, Lasso, uh, Elemental Orbit, the Unleashed Shield Knock that we talked about. Those are important ones to go for in the general tree.
All right.
And then I guess in the elemental tree, you want to get Stormkeeper, you want to get Surge of Power, you want to make sure that you're getting Deeply Rooted Elements, which is the proc chance, which is, when you see someone screaming, I'm procking, that's because they've taken that talent and suddenly they're doing a load of damage. Prime Elementalist, so stronger Fire Ellie. And then I think personally the best feature of all, this is the single most best talent of all outside of Primordial Wave, and you do require Primordial Wave for it, is Primordial Surge, which Big has highlighted has been nerfed, but it was more the utility of the talent that was awesome and not necessarily the extra damage. So I'll just read it out. Primordial Surge, when you cast Primordial Wave, it triggers Lava Surge, which is your instant lava burst proc immediately and every 3 seconds for 12 seconds. These lava surges that are triggered by a primordial wave increase the damage of your next lava burst by 25%. In PvP, this is 15%. So they are still stronger, but the main thing is that every 3 seconds, so 4 times in the next 12 seconds, I believe, you're getting a lava surge proc, and which you can send out lava burst. So it means that you've got what I think we always missed, which is the ability to actually just do damage on demand regularly during that window. So it's honestly the best. It's the best sort of utility and quality of life change that we've had come in for Shadowlands, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
wondering because I've been doing the the Love is in the Air dungeon, or the to get the rocket mount, and I have a shaman that I just queue on to try to get an increased chance of the mount. And I was like, wow, I'm not getting that many lava surge procs.
Mm.
But I guess it's just all primordial surge, probably, right? Like that's how these shamans just get continuous streams of lava burst procs is with this talent. Is that correct?
So it is that, and it's also the way that it interacts, I think, with Skybreaker's Fiery Demise as well, and the way that Lava Surge works in general. So if I read out Lava Surge, it's your Flame Shock damage over time has a 10% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Lava Burst. So that's where that comes from. And I think with the way that Skybreakers works, I think it sort of ticks a bit. It ticks sort of like it kind of ticks and has a critical strike chance, and then when you've got your flame Ellie up, this ticks faster, which means that you have more chances for lava surge to happen. So all kind of your entire kit, and it's shocking that not many people knows it. The reason why Ellie it feels so good is because its entire kit works together in one conjunction to kind of focus on that lava burst and kind of like proc damage from lava surge, and it all works together. So when you have Fire Ellie up, the kind of danger there is you get actually more chances for your lava surge to happen.
Yeah, there's a few specs that are kind of well designed like this, where everything
Mhm,
just kind of flows into it itself.
mhm,
A really good example is like Outlaw Rogue. I mean,
mhm.
it's not really a meta pick right now, but if you at first glance you look at the Outlaw Rogue tree, you're like, what the hell is going on? But once you kind of understand how it works, you realize that everything is just kind of cycling into itself. And it sounds that way with like, flame shock. Like I'm like a lot of this is getting as many flame shock ticks as possible, and that has a bunch of beneficial interactions for your class. And it's kind of nice. Like some of the, as much as we maybe tend to just view the new talent tree as kind of being sometimes annoying, maybe there's kind of a lot of beauty sort of baked into it, and it's like, wow, this is very intelligent. And
Yeah.
you know for druid, for instance, like like a lot of my kit now is baked into life bloom, and a lot of that is supported by the talent tree. And so I think that's like really fun when everything kind of meshes together. I don't know if you mentioned it too, but I mean, a huge part of what defines Elemental Shaman is just they have an increased crit multiplier too, on the at the very top of the tree, which
Yes,
is a big thing. And that's really fun. Is when your crits actually feel like they're doing something.
and they
And
definitely do.
they definitely do, right? And
Yeah.
I think Evoker is the only other the Devastation Evoker is the only other spec that has an increased crit multiplier, but there could be one more that I'm forgetting. But that's a cool feature of Ele Shaman too,
It
which is
is.
crit harder.
It is, and I think that it used to be built in. Like it's just a general. Before obviously using the mop style talent trees, it was just a passive that you had, and
Yeah.
obviously now you can choose it in the tree in the same way that you can also choose to do more healing as well. I think there's an option for that, like 250% more healing. I'll have to double check, but I think there's something along those lines. I don't know whether that's in the Restoration Shaman one, or I know it is in the early one. So you can do Primordial Fury, your healing critical strikes heal for 250% as opposed to 200%. So that there is an option for that as well. It's not an option I think you take very often, but it's definitely an option there.
And then I'm assuming I don't see many shamans ever press Ice Fury these days, even though at one point it was kind of an iconic ability. I believe in
Mhm.
Legion, it was a big part of your
It was,
kit.
yeah.
And now it's just not taken. Is that correct?
You wouldn't take it. No, I think the reason why is because it got nerfed. There was a point where the frost shock. So how it works is you have Ice Fury and then you have a talent called Flux Melting, which when casting frost shock, or hold on, was it that one or was it the other one? I think it might be Flux Shock, which increases your lava burst damage by 20%. But there was some interaction that made the frost shocks hit really hard. I think that's
Mm,
what it is. I don't know if I'm recalling that correctly. So people were taking that and absolutely like smashing people with frost shocks, and also the lava burst damage. But to be honest with you, the setup of it, the problem with it is the setup time. And when you've got
yeah.
melee on you, it's like no one has time. Like I guess you could sort of Spirit Walker's Grace. You could make yourself have that sort of silence immunity or kick immunity. But then there's just no real. I don't know. It doesn't really feel like it's worthwhile. God.
Yeah. I don't know if you were here last. I don't know if we talked about this last time on the cast.
What's
But
that?
I really feel like right now, in order to be a good spec in WoW, you need to be able to do a lot of your stuff on the move. If you cannot do your main rotational stuff while moving, you're just gonna have a really bad time. The Affliction Warlock is like a classic example. Like they just need to sit still and cast their stuff. But you can't really do that these days when you have, you know, these infinitely mobile melee on you, micro CCing your cast. And so I can see that maybe Ice Fury would be bad because it's just like too slow, it's kind of too outdated. You need to just be running these days. You can't
Yeah.
afford not to run.
But it's the same length as an elemental blast, right? And it's just a long cooldown. And Ellie, as everyone knows, doesn't really need to be casting. Like I can be trained by 2 melee and still do top damage,
Yeah.
as long as I'm sort of spreading flame shocks on them and I'm sort of doing damage that way. So yeah, it's why would you choose that over something
Yeah.
like like Primordial Surge, for example?
Yeah, it's a really good. It's interesting. A lot of toolkits, like Desha Rock is a really good example,
Mhm.
are being shoved into the direction of instant cast for range DPS.
Yeah.
Um, because I know, like these days, I know they just buffed Chaos Bolt, but Warlocks don't really cast Chaos Bolt. Like they don't really care about. Like, of course, they cast it, but they don't really care about Chaos Bolt as much these days because they have so much instant cast damage. with
Yeah.
incinerates and shadow burns, and
Oh,
so
like yeah.
yeah, you can do so much while moving these days, and I think just some things have been left behind a little bit, like affliction rocks potentially, but that's a tricky one because they have
Mhm.
potential to do a lot of damage,
They do. They are
But
scary. I am scared of Affliction Warlocks, especially in solo shuffle. I feel like when you're playing a caster comp and you've got an Affliction Warlock on there, it's scary.
yeah, maybe I don't want to go. I don't want to go too much on a tangent. But people, I hear all the time like, oh, affliction rocks are bad in solo shuffle. It's the one spec as a healer that I'm like, I feel the pressure. I feel
Yeah.
like it's really difficult.
Mm.
Yeah.
If it's
And
played well, for sure.
yeah, if it's played well, it just pumps, and it's like, oh man, like
I think that's
this
the hard part.
feels.
Like you said, it's trying to play it well. It's trying to get your dots rolling, to get your curses, to get your UAs up, and to keep them going. Because that's the other thing. There's the dot maintenance. I'm just kind of curious though. Back to Ele Shaman though. Do you have the same problem? No, like seriously though, like because there is a bit of a dot there, right? Like you have to have the rolling meatballs going and that still, right?
You do, yeah. So I mean, Holy Paladins are another worst enemy of Shaman. They're both a worst enemy and a blessing because Holy Paladins sort of seem to I think they've got double dispel, so they tend to get rid of your flame shocks really quickly. Now, I will say that flame shock is now down to a 4.5-second cooldown thanks to Flames of the Cauldron, which is a talent that reduces that. So it means you can spread it fairly quickly, and obviously you've got Primordial Wave, but healers that can dispel a lot and hunters as well, you find that they get rid of them very, very quickly, and that can be a problem. And obviously, we've got dispel protection. Most people will just dispel anyway, despite being thrown up into the air and it doing 40k damage. But it's there, and that's awesome. I've actually had a few games in twos where hunters have killed themselves by dispelling flame shock. Like their healer gets, for example, I play Ele Resto Druid, so we'll
Yep.
cyclone a hunter low health and then swap it. And what they'll do is they'll try and get rid of the dots, forgetting that I've got this dispel protection on, and they'll kill themselves with it, which is always really fun.
It's funny
It
with. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, go, no, you go.
You mentioned Holy Pallies.
Yeah.
It's a cleanse the weak. They
Mhm.
have this talent where if they dispel one debuff, it will dispel it on everyone who's affected by that debuff. So they just can like AoE dispel your flame shocks. What's funny too, what's interesting about Holy Pally, again, I don't want to go into too many tangents, but it's like they have a perfect counter to Ele Shaman and they have a perfect counter to Asa Rogue, but they're somehow the worst healer according to everyone, which is kind of interesting. But I mean, they managed to win the AWC
They did.
Against an Asa Rogue, so there you
Yeah.
go.
I think the thing is that you can blast a Holy Paladin as Ellie. So, for example, in a lot of games, you'll have Holy Paladins come out, and often they'll cross map or they'll go different ways. And the aim is you just flame shock them and whack them every time they come into range. It's the same with Resto Druids. The strength of Ellie is the ability to just do so much damage in a short period of time, especially if Earthshock crits or something like that. As we talked
Yeah.
about that interaction, so you can hit them really hard, but it is very annoying because as I said, they just dispel your flame shocks very quickly, and it's very hard to spread that way and just do a lot of spread damage. And especially if you're being trained by melee, it's hard to keep that up and also press your utility options to survive. Like Earthbind, Earth Grab, everything that you need to do. So it can be difficult. But the spread, I don't think it's too hard actually. Now that they've reduced the cooldown of flame shock, I think it's fairly easy to spread, and also surge of power interaction. So if you earth shock and you press flame shock, it will spread onto two people or two nearby enemies. So that's actually quite a good way of spreading your flame shock should you need to with that interaction.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can dot one and then push a button and it hops over to the other. That kind
Oh
of
yeah,
it's always nice.
and that's a new thing as well because surge of power was a talent choice that you could make for quite a while actually, but nobody really used it. And I think only very recently with the change of the toolkit and change of talents and how everything interacts, that actually now it's probably one of my most favorite options. Because as we talked about earlier with Big, is that we've got Earth Grab and Knock Root, but we've also got Frost Shock Root. that comes from Surge of Power. So if I press Earth Shock and then I use Frost Shock, it freezes them in place for 6 seconds, which is a wonderful, wonderful ability. If you've got none of those options for yourself and you're chasing someone, you can kind of keep them there. And it has lots of other interactions as well that we'll talk about when we come to Stormkeeper specifically.
You keep teasing the Stormkeeper. I can't wait to get to that.
Yeah, no, we should do, because there are some good interactions that work quite well.
Indeed. Um, so again, before we move on to the PvP talents, though, is there anything else that we should talk about, at least in the main talent section, between overall and just specifically on the Ellie side? Anything that you're like, if this is your first time playing Ellie, you got to do this.
If it's your first time playing Ellie, play Warlock. No, I'm kidding.
Play
No,
Assassination Rogue.
play Assassination Rogue again, just swap to Assassination Rogue. Just press W and win. Get full set, press W. No, I think if you're playing Ellie for the first time, my recommendation to you is to take it with a grain of salt, because it's a hard spec in PvP. Because unlike Mage and unlike Warlock, you don't have quite the defensive toolkit that can kind of just save you. You don't have a oh no button. You don't have dark packs. You don't have big wall that kind of gives you that sort of kick immunity and stuff like that. You don't have port. You don't have anything like that. What you do have is preventative utility. So I would just focus on figuring out how to do damage, and then you can figure out your defensives afterwards. But I think the idea is just take it slow, and when you figure it out that way, because it can be really punishing when they sit on you and you have no idea what you're meant to do or how to stop it. And that comes with time and practice, I think, figuring that out.
I think that's a good lesson for pretty much any spec. Is just take it with time and don't expect that you're going to know how to respond as soon as you start getting pummeled to your face, right?
Yeah, especially as a ranged DPS for sure.
Yeah. Okay, PvP talents then. We can only pick 3, right?
You can only pick 3.
So
we can talk about them. It should change. I think the one that should never change, in my opinion, is Controller Lava, which is your Flame Shock's damage occurs 15% more. And the reason why this should never change is because that talent in particular works with kind of links up with Flames of the Cauldron, which has your Flame Shock dealing damage 15% faster. So all of this, it's your damage is occurring 50% more, your damage is occurring 50% more. That's 30% more ticks, so aka more chances for Lava Surge. And then on top of, with your Fire Ellie being active, there's another 33% on top of that. So I think in total that's a 63% faster Flame Shock tick, which means 63% more of a chance for you to have Lava Surge, which
And
is
you're getting more Maelstrom, right?
And you're getting more Maelstrom. Yes, if you go for, well, it depends actually. If you take the Searing Flames talent, then you do. So you generate more Maelstrom that way. So it depends on kind of, there are options that you can, in the kind of nuance of Ellie, you can go for that, or you can take a different option, whatever you prefer. But you that has a 100% chance for you to generate 1 Maelstrom. So yeah, more chance for Maelstrom if you take that talent. And that just, all the interaction there is just insane. So all in all, it just means that you're doing more damage, and also your dispel protection. So it's a no-brainer for me. I'll always take Control Lava.
makes
And then
sense.
at that point afterwards, I mean, it's just so good. Like the interaction works, right?
Yeah.
Um,
What about Counter-Strike? I remember that always that was like a sweet little gem that would get dropped every once in a while just for funsies, but I don't think it's like a hard pick anymore, is it?
no, it's not. I mean, there is a, you could if you wanted to. It's just the fact that it's easily destroyed,
Yeah.
and it has to be within 20 yards of the damage. And if it's within 20 yards of the people doing the damage, then it's going to get hit. The only time I can see this ever being the case is if you're playing Demo Ellie and you place it on top of all the imps, and pray for the best. And like they're not going to find it within all of
Yeah.
the. If you do it like that, then yeah, maybe against like a melee cleave, that could be like a real niche thing where they just end up killing themselves because of the fact that they're absolutely blasting. Just put it in all the imps, and yeah, and it all works out. So that I can imagine would be an interesting way of doing it. But otherwise, not really a sort of pick. The other options you've got, and this is the sort of my go-to, is you've got grounding totem, which as we talked about is an incredibly useful ability. Not so useful into classes that don't really kind of have things you can ground. Like for example, let's say you're queuing into Demon Hunter, Warrior, Mistweaver. You probably wouldn't want to take grounding totem for that
Yeah.
because you're not gonna be able to use that on anything really. Um, the other options I'd say are static field totem. There are some incredible things you can do with that totem. It can save your life. It can trap enemies inside. You can kind of almost lock people away from one another. I know that there's an interaction with what's it called? Totemic projection, which is from the general shaman tree, where you can relocate your active totem and you can drag people with static field totem from one position to another. It pulls them away because it's kind of like a cage. So you can use that to kind of, let's say you've got an assassination rogue on top of your healer. You've got that relocation talent. You grab them, you move them away. On death mark, they can't do anything. So unless obviously they cloak, for example, or a warrior on their spear, for example, you can kind of use that. It has so much utility there, so that's a really important one. And then obviously you've got Sky Fury Totem and Unleash Shield. So Sky Fury Totem increases the critical effect and of your damage and healing spells for all your allies, including yourself, by 20% for 15 seconds. So that's massive. You can do some big damage. And then Unleash Shield, as we talked about before, will unleash your Lightning Shield to knock them back and Earth Shield to root them in place. And those are the kind of ones you want to go for. So my general setup will be Static Field Totem and Unleash Shield with Control Lava if I'm facing melee. And then sometimes I'll throw in Static Field Totem depending on what we're going up against. And then mostly for range, it'll be Sky Fury and Grounding Totem. And that kind of tends to be the kind of go-to.
All right. Um, it's just like because and this is to a point that was kind of pointed out in chat, and it's something I know. You just got are there? You're playing at a fairly high level. The whole comment of like Counter Strike isn't really good because it's so easily destroyed. What's kind of the point in the bracket system where it's like it's actually kind of a viable thing because people don't know to.
I definitely think, yeah, if you could play it at any sort of lower end solo shuffle and probably see some success. I think the thing is with the way that people have access to information now, on with WoW, you'd have to be pretty. I'd have to say you'd have to really not know what it is to never attack it. And admittedly, I will say this, and I shouldn't really be surprised. During some of the lower end solo shuffles or even lower end threes, there are people that don't see Sky Fury Totem just smack bang in the middle and just leave that open. So if they're leaving that just as it is, and that is a dangerous thing to do, by the way, then I suppose Counter Strike actually could work. I think the problem with the Counter Strike is it's very obvious that something is attacking you and hitting you and is hurting you.
Yeah,
So
you get like this animation, it like beams, It's like,
Yeah.
exactly.
right.
Whereas Sky Fury just kind of sits there and you start glowing a little bit, and people are like, "Oh, I wonder why they're glowing," But I think, yeah, with Counter
Reason why
Strike,
Jake is glowing. Got it.
it's
Okay. Yeah.
that's my secret skin technique, Sky Fury Totem. So, but yeah, I mean, people tend to ignore a lot of stuff in lower solo shuffle. So I think, yeah, go for it. To be honest, you could test it and have a lot of fun. I think personally, one of the best tricks you can do is drop the totem and stand on top of it. That's one of the things I learned, I think, from Legion. I think that's what people used to do in Legion a lot, which was, or maybe they've always done it, but especially when it kind of became more of a sort of like you drop one singular totem. I remember in Legion, people would drop down Sky Fury and or Counter Strike Totem. I think that's when it came in. And if you stood on top of it, it was really hard for people to click the name because they'd have
Yeah.
to click your tag rather than the Counter Strike Totem. And so that's what I suggest. So put down Counter Strike Totem, stand on top of it, see what happens.
I love it. I think that's always the best way. Give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen,
Yeah,
right?
and let us know at technically PvP on Twitter.
Jake, you're so much better at this. I'm just gonna quit now. I'm just gonna.
No.
You got
I could. We couldn't do this without you, Gareth. I see.
it. uh, speaking of not being able to do it without anything, what about the 2-piece and 4-piece? Can you do it without it, or do you need it?
No. We would. You definitely need the two set. It's interesting actually. I was in a solo shuffle with somebody. I cannot remember the name. It was a rank one player, and he was like, "Oh, dude, I'm getting my 4 set soon. I'm so happy." And I was like, I'm not really too fussed about the 4 set. And he's like, "No, dude, it's insane." And I've kind of been thinking about it. And I don't personally think the 4 set for Elemental Shaman is insane. I think the 2 set is incredible. So the 2 set is your Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Lava Burst increase the damage of your next Earth Shock or Earthquake by 5%, stacking up to 5 times. So AKA, if you do Lightning Bolt 2 times, Lava Burst 3 times, you've got max 25% extra damage on your Earth Shock. And the reason why that's so great is that stacks with the talent Magma Chamber, in which Flame Shock damage increases the damage of your next Earth Shock by 3%, stacking up to 20 times.
Wow.
So I think that's 60% extra damage. I think that has been nerfed though in PvP. So I think it's more kind of like, I think it got nerfed by 50 or 60. So it's more like 25 to 30%. But obviously, with that extra 25% on top, your Earthshock can do almost 50% extra damage. So that's quite big. And if you're wondering what that is, before I got 2 set, I was doing about, mostly 30 to 40k Earthshocks. With it, nowadays it's up to about 80, sometimes 120. Most of the time, that can be life or death with ending or finishing a kill. You get a rogue that's kind of running away behind a corner. I credit him for 100k. He's going down. You wouldn't be able to do that without the 2 set, so that's quite important. The 4 set, however, is when you cast Earthshock, you increase your mastery by 8% for 5 seconds. I don't think that's massive. Your mastery is tied to your overload, and obviously overload does do certain interactions, and obviously does a lot of damage as well. But for 5 seconds, to be honest with you, you're probably going to get 1 out unless you're getting like really lucky with Lava Surge, or you're within that time period of Primordial Surge where you've got that rolling Lava Surge thing for every 12 seconds. I don't think it's a massive deal. It's certainly not a big thing. It's not like, wow, 4 sets incredible, but it's definitely useful. It's not too bad. 8% is quite a lot of mastery. Just means that you're more likely to get a elemental overload, so you're more likely to get your second Lava Burst in that cast within that 5 seconds, and that's kind of it. But for me, it's the 2 set that's the most important.
Okay, I'm dumb. People talk about this elemental overload, and
Mm-hmm.
I still don't understand it. Can
I
you
can explain it.
please?
So, elemental overload is your mastery, and it's a passive effect. So basically, your lightning bolt, your lava burst, and your chain lightning have a percentage chance depending on what your mastery is. So mine is 20% at the minute. So I have a 20% chance to trigger a second cast on the same target, and I believe it does 85% or something along those lines. Let me check because there is a talent I've got at the minute that does that. But it's basically a chance to trigger a second version of that. So either a second lava burst or a second lightning bolt or chain lightning. Yeah, it is 85%. So it does 85% of normal damage and generating less maelstrom. So basically, let's say you send out a lava burst that does 40k damage. You send out another one and it does like 35k, basically.
Okay.
But it happens within one global. So that's where the damage comes from. Yeah.
Okay.
So I press Lava Burst once, and the second one comes out, and technically I've done 80k damage in that one global. Ish.
All right. And that obviously that's still the same graphic. Like you still see 2 go flying across the air.
Yeah.
And
So
cool. Okay.
I do the cast goes out, the Lava Burst goes out, and almost kind of like a second or half a second afterwards, another one comes flying out as well and does the damage.
Wow.
It's kind of like one after the other. That's kind of where you get the machine gun from, or the lava kind of idea.
Okay.
There is a talent, and I love this talent personally. This is one of my favorites. I didn't realize it was the case until I really went in depth into the tree. But there is a talent called Echo Chamber, which increases the damage dealt by your elemental overloads by 8%, and it stacks twice. So you can go from basically having an 85% damage reduction on your you do 85% of the normal damage of your lava burst. Instead, that takes it up to 93, and then if you do it twice, it puts it to 100%. So whenever you overload, it's like the same spell basically. So you do
Nice.
40k twice in a row.
That's
Seems
not bad.
good.
It's kind of, it's all right. All right.
It's not
Thank
bad
you.
at all. It's awesome.
Thank you for explaining that to me. Because yeah, I didn't understand that. Like, ooh, elemental overload. That sounds really awesome. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I know many classes, but I think this really with shaman has always been that like just one thing on its own sounds kind of meh, but then it's this talent, that talent, and this other talent that all add together to then give it this extra. Oh, and then you have this other thing you do, and it gives it more. And then you have this other thing that if you get that off, it does more. It's just like this repetitive stacking of it was like
Yeah.
the borrowed power of classes before there's actually borrowed power. What's called shaman.
It's as kind of Big said earlier, it's the idea that the entire toolkit and the entire talent system just works together so incredibly well. It's crazy. And obviously the mastery aspect of things is a different change. Like obviously you don't have that in Wrath of the Lich King. Like if you played Wrath of the Lich King Classic, you send out a lava burst and it's just that one time and it slaps. And obviously you have an overload in the talents for your lightning bolt. But that's kind of how lava burst works. You just send that out. Now it's kind of baked into those three abilities with chain lightning and lava burst in modern WoW, and it's just awesome. It's just a great interaction. So that's what kind of I think is so interesting is that when you look at an elemental shaman's details, you're like, oh, lava burst only hit him for 40k. That's not that much at all in comparison to some other classes. But then you've got to realize it's hitting you for 40k, and then more than likely afterwards, there's an overload coming up that's hitting you for 35% or 35k, sorry, on top of that. And as we say, that's 75k in one global. And not on top of that, you also get in the flame shock ticking damage, and then possibly an earth shock after that. And that's where all that huge kind of spiky damage seems to come from, especially if you proc your deeply rooted elements as well. It's just kind of nutty.
And if you do the primordial wave, which then creates the procs for the instacast, those can also proc elemental overload as well, right? So you're getting those 4 procs over 12 seconds. So I mean, really, like there's some chances there to just really overload somebody. Like there's no way they could heal through that. Like even as a healer's just about to heal. Maybe is this the reason why people are like elemental shaman, because like it's all this RNG, like Big said, is like the lottery machine. It's like you pull the arm and it's like lava, lava, lava. Yay, I won. Don't need 3 cherries. You got 3 lava balls. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is like that a little bit in the sense that when you're kind of looking for deep rooted elements kind of procs that way, you can kind of obliterate people. But actually, I don't personally think it's that RNG. You have so much front loaded damage that you're actually doing a lot of damage just in general over time. And obviously, there is a bit of a kind of padding in regards to how flame shock interacts and how much damage that is doing. That's kind of just a natural sort of rot. But the actual getting of lava surges and everything like that is not that hard. You have that up often. I don't think there's too much in that regard. You have a lot more control over that than you think. Yeah, there is a bit of RNG elements to it, but it's not too crazy. So I think when people are kind of going like, oh, it's a kind of like you're sort of like a lottery machine, not actually the case a lot of the time. A lot of the time you're able to finish games and kill people without proccing, and you don't really need to do that. A lot of that is baked into your kit anyway. A lot of it is based on when you've got Fire Ellie up, for example. But a lot of it just comes from just the amount of pressure you're able to put out and how much utility you have. In 2s, it's not the best spec, but in 3s, you really sort of buff up the specs that you're playing with. Especially like a warlock, or as we've seen, Asa rogues. You can play with them.
I think with solo shuffle, I mean, generally speaking, as a caster, you kind of want a very specific lobby. But I think elemental shaman kind of get punished less maybe by lobbies compared to something like an arcane mage, right? Would you say that's correct? Like you there's very few specs in solo shuffle that you're like, oh man, I wish this guy wasn't on my team, right? Like you're kind of like, oh cool, like I have a Windwalker monk on my team. Like you're not really dreading anything on your side, right? Or am I wrong on that about
No, no,
that?
definitely not. The only time I dread that is when obviously they are really bad, and you can tell when someone's like a really like just not very good. They are getting crushed. But the thing is with Ellie is that you just have one job, which is to do the most amount of damage possible, and then just provide that utility. So it's quite a lot of the time. You know, even when I'm going up into my worst lobbies, and to be honest with you, when I got my 2-4, that was the worst, one of the worst lobbies that I've had, and it was a Windwalker, Unholy Death Knight, Demon Hunter, and that's really grim because they just stick to you all the time. But even
Yeah.
then, I'm able to do a load of damage. I was still kind of like almost topping the meters, and it was just sort of like figuring out about, okay, what are these people's kind of levels, what are their sort of like skill sets, and kind of figuring out how to go from there. So it's I wouldn't say that there's a bad lobby for Ellie, but I think, you know, if it's all casters, that's the best lobby you can go for because you just absolutely crush other casters. And if it's kind of like a full melee, yeah, it's grim, but you can kind of work through it, especially if your healer's kind of vaguely competent, or if you've got something like a Mistweaver, because they've got a panic button for you. Any healer that's got a panic button for you is the best thing possible because you will live.
I don't know if you feel this way too. I know disc priests are considered really good in solo shuffle, but I do not like having a disc priest on my team as a DPS because I feel like I'm just dead the entire game. And then you play with like a Mistweaver monk or a Resto dude, you're like, wow, man, I'm enjoying life. Like I'm at 100% HP. I'm not worried about
Yeah,
dying. And yeah, I'm sure you get a Mistweaver on your team. Like, yes, I can stand still. You know, like I don't have to move. I can just stay in one place, and you're just probably like blasting, right? But
exactly. But that's because you're playing Boomkin and you're like me, you have a wall. I mean, probably one of the worst walls in the game, because let's face it, Barkskin does nothing. And you don't have a hard like immunity. You're not like you don't have, for example, the things that I think warlocks have, or mages. You don't have an ice
Yep.
block or anything. If you've got a sort of like a hard immunity like that, then it's totally fine for you to just block something, or block this, or kind of port there, or use this, you know, use Dark Pact, which feels like a massive shield, unkillable. Um, when you have that Mistweaver in there, yeah, you can just sit back and chill, because if something bad does happen, you know that the cocoon is gonna 100% have you right. I don't
yeah.
think any amount of charges of pain sup is gonna protect me from the Serenity from the monk and the full unholy DK onslaught. So sadly,
I think the fact that we saw somebody die through pain sup this weekend alone
mm,
kind of speaks to just how lacking that CD actually feels in the face of brute force that we're experiencing from Mali.
for sure.
I think big. Why don't we move on to the next couple sets of questions? I feel you have, I think you have a bit of a more vested interest in some of these than I do.
Yeah, I actually don't know much about this, but we're going to be talking about stats because I know you can kind of customize your stats a little bit more precisely these days. I'm guessing you probably want as much versatility as possible, or what are your general gearing priorities?
So usually it's versatility. I mean, that kind of seems to be everyone's sort of main one. I think also versatility is quite important for PvE Elemental Shaman as well, which is very strange. So it means that if you are sort of grinding that PvP gear, you can go into PvE as well, or I guess the other way around too, should you wish. But yeah, versatility is big. I think at the beginning of the expansion, I thought that mastery would be important. And then I realized very quickly that it's the beginning of an expansion, so my haste felt awful. And
Yeah,
with the way that Melee had so much more mobility and interrupts and stuff like that, it felt really difficult. So obviously mastery does feel cool. Like it does definitely feel good to kind of have really high, like there's definitely a build out there for it, in the same way that sort of that mastery build existed at the end of Shadowlands. That can still exist, but it feels worse in general with the way that haste feels. So for me, it'd be Versa haste, because it just seems to interact very well with Flame Shock and how your lava surges work in that regard, and that kind of all interacts with one another because obviously it ticks faster. So I think haste is definitely the one, and I've always preferred haste builds on Shaman just because it just feels so much better to have high haste rather than this sort of like big mastery version.
Yeah, I think haste is just in general like a good comfort stat. Like you
Mm.
cannot. Whenever you itemize haste, you're like, you never feel really bad about it.
Mhm.
Whereas you itemize full mastery, it's like, oh, I'm so slow.
You
Like
can feel
can't
it.
do it. Yeah, you can feel it. So one stat you can obviously feel. With that said, are there any like caps like for haste? Like, is there a specific break point you want for, I don't know, your flame shock ticks or anything?
Not as far as I'm aware. I think obviously the usual rule of thumb is that after 30, there tends to be that sort of diminishing returns, but
Yeah.
you're never really going to get to 30 unless you really pump all that haste in. I mean, I've got a lot of haste on my gear set, and I think I can probably get to about 20 without being in PvP, and I think you can kind of get up to 24, 25 with how the tier set works.
Yeah.
So that is enough, really. That's kind of probably what you're going to get to for now, unless they change the way that the tier sets work in the next sort of season. That's probably the best you're going to get. I think if you itemize more haste with the Drake water stuff, so the world PvP gearing, and then upgrade that using those special tokens that you can get, I think you can get more haste in that regard. But that takes a lot of time and effort, and sadly, I don't have that, so I don't know the answers on that one. But I think you can optimize haste up to about 30%, which I think is good. But to be honest with you, with how it works, I think a nice healthy balance of having a bit more mastery as well and a bit more crit, you'll just see that the interactions worked really well. Like I remember for sure that that back in early Shadowlands, there was a crit build that you could go where you would just hit such insane numbers. It was really fun. And I think having a little bit of those in there within your sort of stat basis is good.
And then, I mean, a nice thing about PvP these days, you can pretty much play whatever race you want. And so, what is the preferred racial right now for Elemental Shaman?
It's got to be dwarf, and I'm really glad about that because I've always been such a big proponent of dwarf. I played dwarf since I think since must be in sort of like WOD. I think that's when I first went dwarf, and I've always really enjoyed it as a race. I think Stoneform or the Dark Iron Blood is a what's it called? It's a blood something. I can't remember what it's called now, but the um was it Fireblood? That's it. So the Fireblood
Fireblood, yeah.
version, yeah. So the one that gives you extra stats for getting rid, or the defensive version. They're just such incredibly useful racials. Like for example, at the end of BFA, you could do that on Obsidian Claw. There were certain other things that you could kind of use to get rid of it. Nowadays, you can use it to get rid of Deathmark, all of the bleeds from Assassination Rogues, Ferals, any magical items like it works on mind games, stuff like that. There's a lot of great things you can kind of use it for, and I think it's just so vital. Another thing about being Dark Iron, for example, that I really like is I believe it's Forged in Flames reduces the damage taken from physical attacks by 1%. I know that's not much, but 1% could be the difference between life and death. That could be the 2 HP you're at before your healer comes out of CC and gets that top off. Gets able, like an NS Swiftman, whatever, regrowth. So that's the possibility there. So that's kind of like there's a lot of options there, and I think dwarf is just the best.
I mean, dwarf is
Nice.
pretty
Is
awesome.
there? And I think like orc is still okay, right? Like you're not gonna
Yeah.
be sad if you're orc.
No, you're definitely not going to be sad if you're orc. I think orc works really well. I mean, especially with the CC reduction, like you still get that 20%, I think, from stuns. You still have the Blood Fury, so you can still do that extra damage that still kind of links up really, really well. Orcs look cool. There's still also I think the pet option as well does
Oh,
buffs your fire ellie too.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, orc is still viable because I mean it's technically a pet, like you control it, so it's still doing that. So I think there's still definitely reasons to play Orc. I just think personally, I've always loved Dwarf, so I'm a bit biased on that front.
Just out of
Right.
curiosity, this
Mhm.
is completely tangential aside. Is there any race that can't play Shaman that you'd like? I'm asking because there's always that now they're building more races into classes and specs and that.
That's actually a very good point. Night Elf would be cool.
Ooh.
I'd love to be able to shadow meld some stuff.
That
Yeah.
would be I wonder what that would look like in Ghost Wolf form. I wonder how fast you'd be able to run.
Yeah, you just gonna run off and then shadow meld and then you're back on again.
Yeah.
I think it's that would be really cool for me because, like, there's so many opportunities where you can kind of use shadow meld to kind of avoid CC or avoid damage coming out. Sometimes you haven't got grounding. Like, you just be an unstoppable force. I definitely think that's really awesome. I think underrated shaman specs like Cold Tyrann for sure. Like, being able to knock people with that punch is
Yep.
really awesome. So there's you could have like 3 knocks on Blaze Edge.
I didn't
So
know Colterian could even be shaman. I don't think I've ever seen a Colterian shaman. Like,
they're
oh
the
my god.
they're the chads. They're the real chads.
I don't remember. I remember Colturin was like the hidden gem in rated BGs for the flag maps because you could just like punch people off of some of the platforms.
Yeah.
So
There are certain combinations you never see. Like trolls have been able to be warriors for a very long time now, but you never ever see a troll warrior. Like it's very
Yeah.
rare. And
which is funny
I
because they
love
got the
seeing.
mini lust they can do.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the racials right now, and
Yeah.
I guess like Nightborn can be warriors, and like well, I guess we should talk about shamans. Let's see,
Damn it, big.
shamans. I mean, I've seen Volpera shamans. I know Absurge was playing Volpera for a while.
Yeah, he is.
That's just a meme though. Like, it's in terms of its actual sort of like the thing with Coltiran, right? That is there's a one useful ability there. Like, that's all you
Yeah,
need. One useful ability, and like, okay, now this
Yeah.
is viable.
Yeah.
you could be a panda too. I've very rarely, if ever, seen a panda shaman. It's
Panda
quite.
Shaman could work as well because you get that versatility bonus from eating the food, and you can
That
also
doesn't
panda tap people. Although I don't know if that works anymore.
I'm not sure if that well, especially the versatility from food. I don't think that works in rated though, does it? Because
I
food
know it
buffs
did.
don't work.
Well, the thing is, that one in particular used to work. I don't know if that's changed or not. But
Mm.
you used to be able to do that in Arena.
Confirmed in
I
chat,
know.
it does.
Yeah, because in food buffs, I know. What was the Covenant? The vampires. I don't even remember what.
Venthyr.
Venthyr. Like you could have the Venthyr food buff in Arena, and it kind of like had an RNG element. So I think there's certain food buffs you can get. Kind
Okay.
of like, what a goofy ratio! Like you need to eat food to
I
get
know.
it. Like
I know.
They're
But I mean, it's
pandas.
1% Versa. I don't know. Like, it's useful, I guess. But the Panda Sap is quite good for like. But I think that DRs with Hex, so
yeah,
I'm not sure that's really that useful for at least for Shaman. But the Coltira knock would be really good for
Yeah.
rated Arena. Maybe very highly underrated. Maybe there's a video in there. Maybe I have to make a Coltira Shaman and do something with
I
that.
think you need to. You need to make one like a big burly Shrek
Yeah.
looking
Yeah. Yeah.
shaman.
Yeah. What should I call him? That'd be the question. I don't know. We'll figure that one out another time.
If you have a
Call him.
name for TreesapJake's Culturan Shaman, send it to @TreesapJake on Twitter.
Yeah.
Call him like Hank or like Homer or something. Like
Oh my god.
some.
That's true. I should
Right.
maybe I just call him. No, I was about to say Shrake, but I don't think that works. I'm gonna stop now. It's too early in the morning for me to figure that one out.
Right.
As far as comps are concerned, I know you mentioned twos are pretty brutal. Is there anything you want to play with in twos? I assume maybe like a Resto Druid or something. Is there any preferred healer?
Yeah, Resto Druid is probably one of the better ones to play with. The Resto Druid and Ellie work so well together. You have a lot of synergy, and one of the big things about that is just the ability for Resto Druids to kind of like hot you up and just leave you to go and then do damage. I think it works really well with a Disc Priest as well nowadays. So I think both can work, but you want something that kind of like that can help you with damage, because one of the biggest problems in twos is being able to finish your enemies. That because you don't have obviously any MS effect, and you are going up against classes and specs that tend to have an MS effect. So that's where the big one that's the big problem that you've got. So anything that can help you do the damage, like Disc and Resto Druid, is really, really good. Probably would work with an Evoker, but I really don't think they're the best for you. I think overall it'll be Resto Druid.
Nice. And I know 3v3 you have a lot of comp options, right? Like you can play with pretty much anything. Is there any standouts to you as far as 3v3 comps go?
So there was, I mean, the obvious one is Lock Shaman. So LSD, that is the kind of bread and butter Shaman comp. It's incredibly easy to play. It's very, very simple. You have a lot of DRs that don't kind of go together. Like you can hex, you can root, you can stun. The Warlock can, spam fear if you're being attacked. It's very good. You have a lot of defensive capabilities. That tends to be the big go-to for me. I've played a lot more of, though, very recently, Ele Mage. So specifically Frost Mage, Elemental Shaman. You'll be surprised at how good that comp is, especially when you play with something like a Resto Druid or an Evoker or a Disc Priest. Disc Priest especially, I've had a lot of success from. You do a lot of damage, and you have a fair amount of survivability, but it's mostly the damage output, because most people will sit on an Elemental Shaman thinking, oh, it's just a Frost Mage. You're wrong. The Glacial Spikes come at you for 260k with Sky Fury up specifically. It's very scary. So very underrated comp in my opinion, but you can play with anything really. That's the joy of Elemental Shaman. You can literally play with absolutely anything. So
Yeah, no, like on EU at least, like Ellie Rogue is becoming popular too.
yeah, Ele
Play with
Rogue.
an Asa or a Sub Rogue.
Both work.
And then, I mean, solo shuffle, you obviously can't choose your comp, and I think we kind of alluded to this before, but you want lobbies with casters, right? Like you're
Yeah.
pretty happy. That seems to be the rule of thumb. You want you want a lobby with whatever role you are, right? If you're melee, you want melee typically. If you're a caster, you want casters. I don't know if
Yeah.
there's really any exception to that rule. Seems to
To
be the case.
to be honest, the best lobby for me is when it's like you've got either you've got two casters, so yourself and one other, and then two melee, or alternatively you've got you've got three casters and one melee, because that one melee gets absolutely torn apart all the time. So you kind of have a
Yeah.
good time. And then when they're on your team, because as an Elemental Shaman, you work so well with them, you're actually able to keep up. You're kind of running with them. You're helping them out. You're stopping you're kind of slowing the other the other sort of casters. So you're actually able to kind of help them out. And I think that works out quite well. Like most of my 6-0 lobbies have come from sort of either sort of, two casters and two melee, or sort of mostly casters. And that sort of tends to be the thing, because you just work so well together with everything.
Very nice. And now we have to ask this question because it's vital for the audience to know. And we don't want you to lie about this, but what are the best ways to counter elemental shamans?
So play an assassin. I can't even talk. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. Play an Asa Rogue. There we go. I've got it. Play an Asa Rogue, and you will win every single time. No, but in real talk, the actual counter for Elemental Shaman, and I think is sort of constant pressure and knowing which spells to kick. So Ellie can still do damage regardless of whether you're on top of them or not. But one of the things they can't really handle is the amount of stuns that you can kind of put out, because we can only wall when we're not stunned or in CC. So if you're able to kidney shot off the DR, then you can pretty much kind of dismantle them fairly easily. And I think that's probably one of the biggest counters. Like stuns tend to really mess shamans up. And I think knowing what to kick as well. Like if you kick lava burst every now and then, you're going to actually kind of stop the damage output quite a bit. And I think that tends to be the kind of big counter: stuns and knowing what to kick. And for example, if you kick him on Healing Surge or kick him on Stormkeeper, that guy can't wall, and then you're free to do whatever you like to them. So there's lots of great things. But at the minute, assassination rogues are very, very scary.
Very nice. And then we have this question we ask every single time. Very open-ended, but
Best
if you
question.
if you could have your way in this world with changing World of Warcraft or making any significant change to the game, what would it be?
um, because we're talking about shamans, we'll go on shamans. I think my personal thing that I'd love to change at the minute would be to reverse what's going on in 10.0.7 with the general shaman tree. I think that's definitely what I would do. Um, I definitely think it would be. I think in terms of shamans for sure, I think it'd have to be kind of like an update to the general sort of theme of the tree. Like I think the general tree is quite weak for shaman. I'd like to see kind of capstones that are better for it. Like for example, bring back echoing shock. That was a cool ability. I know it was elemental only, but imagine if you could echoing shock healing surge or echoing shock something else like a lightning bolt for enhancement shaman or something like that. There could be some utility there. And I think there's so many cool options that we used to have that should be brought back and put as a capstone instead of some other bits and pieces. Because I can bet you most people in PvE probably don't even use stone skin or tranquil air. I understand them; they are meant to be general, but I don't know. They seem pretty boring and weak for me. Um, so yeah, that's what I would change if I could. If I had all the money in the world, I would put more love into shamans because they are my favorite class of all time.
Garrison, what about you?
Um, I don't know, honestly, Jake kind of took it like the fact that this spec, especially in the PvP side, is not even taking any of the capstones other than like some niche opportunities, but for the most part, just avoiding them seems really ridiculous to me. So I'd have to ask for a complete rework of the tree and put some talents that actually make the class make the players want to actually hit those capstone talents that are supposed to be the like the coup d'etat, that piece de resistance that you really need to get to the end and have to really make the spec work and just be that awesome power. And the fact that they're being avoided completely, just like something missed the mark there. So
For sure. Mm.
yeah, big though.
I'm gonna
You've
steal.
played with and against. Like, what's your love hate relationship with Ellie? What do you want changed?
Um, I don't know actually. I I don't remember how grounding works. I wish you could get rid. You can't get rid of grounding unless you kill the grounding totem, right? I think that's
So it
the only.
lasts for 3 seconds and it will stay there and absorb everything up to a certain limit. So I think there is a certain limit of, for example, if an enemy elemental shaman puts down a grounding totem and I put one charge of stormkeeper into it, it usually dies.
Okay, because like that would be my main concern. It's very hard for me to kill grounding as a druid unless I, have Star Surge ready. Like it's very difficult. So I think maybe an easier way to play around grounding for me would be the thing I would change. Um, I was gonna
For me,
give a completely different answer, unrelated to shamans. I was gonna say the one thing I would change is it's gonna steal Jake's answer. They're redoing the rest of Druid tree as well in the next patch, and it's just to me it's like a strict downgrade. Like it doesn't seem like it's gonna be that fun to play Druid with the way they're redesigning the talent tree. So yeah, I'd like them to revert that, and that would be the one thing I would not change is the Druid tree.
yeah, I think it's quite clearly a PVE change, right? For me,
Yeah, I
like
don't.
Mm-hmm.
that's what.
Yeah, that's the thing that sucks is like I think I don't know how it is with other classes, but I know like Druid healing rotation is so much different in PvE that kind of, maybe that's pulling strings in the wrong direction for some specs in PvE or PvP,
Yeah,
but who knows?
I think those are good changes. I think everyone loves the new talent system, so I mean, I wouldn't change. I mean, obviously, I'd want the capstones to be different, but most of it seems really good for me. A lot of the times, I just think it's just they need to find a good balance where they don't like changing everything completely. They should be kind of buffing the talent trees rather than kind of like removing the way that certain things interact. Like for example, the chain heal version that they're doing for shamans, which is where you kind of have to go down chain heal in order to actually even get to Earth Shield. And it's kind of like, yeah, I get that. It's sort of to help out other people get certain points, but it really kind of it's a real massive nerf, and it just seems unnecessary.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope it's really you don't know. Like hopefully they listen. Hopefully they listen to the community and see both sides to it. Um, I'm not sure if there's like a best answer for both sides to not nerf PvP while trying to help out PvE. It always seems to be that duality, right? It's either like PvE does really good and it's doing too well, we're gonna nerf it. Then PvP gets completely like because it's even worse off. It gets even more worse off, and then vice versa. Like PvP is doing really good. Okay, well we gotta do this, and then PvEers like
It's how it is. I mean, it would be simple if they just every single change they made, they just added it into either it's like like this isn't they've done PvE only changes in the sense that they say this does not change in PvP. Like we are buffing Mind Blast by 20%. This will not be changing in PvP. All they need to do is do that, and then keep track of everything they've done in that regard, like they should be doing, I'm sure. And then it'll be fine because then they'll be like, okay, so we balanced this for PvE last time. Turns out PvP probably needs it as well. So we're going to also add that to the PvP change. And that's all they need to do. That for me would be perfect if they just did, this is PvE only, this is PvP only. That's all works out fine. That's that. And they kind of did those changes a bit more and made it sort of a bit more kind of focused in that regard. And it'd be totally fine. That's all they need to do.
If only. If only.
If only.
All right. Before we get on to the WoW PvP news, we do have a little piece of news for ourselves. And there is technically PvP new merch now available over on Etsy. There's a link in the show notes. A link just posted on the Twitch stream as well. But yeah, if you want, you can head out over there and get yourself a shirt with our logo on it. And any of the other shows under Bonus Roll Productions. There's a bunch of other great shows there. But yeah, highly recommend. They got long sleeves, short sleeves, and tank tops. So whatever suits your fancy. Multiple colors, really good quality. Highly check it out, or highly recommend. Go check it out. Support the show. Support Bonus Roll Production. That's all. Let's get into the PvP news.
All right. Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
Indeed. So, WoW PvP news, as we talked about, there's Cup 3 and Cup 4 for AWC has finished. During Cup 3, quick congrats to the Agents and Luminosity Gaming for winning EU and NA respectively. And in Cup 4, quite the upset. We got Poggers, who won the EU, and Where's Gordy finishing first in the NA. Luminosity actually got knocked out down into the lowers and then got taken out by Where's Gordy. That was quite surprising, actually. I'm not gonna lie. For all unsaid, it was actually Golden Guardians that knocked them down into the lowers, which I think was even more surprising because Luminosity was like their Achilles heel, and they were able to knock them down. Did you guys watch any of this? Like, was there anything that really jumped out of any of the shows or any of the matches that you found surprising?
There's the tank team in EU that kind of, I think, took people off guard. So that was interesting to see. And the guy Thomas, the warrior Thomas, he's pretty active in the skill cap Discord actually. And so it's always neat to see someone you kind of do well in these tournaments. And so I think that was I think chat was having a really good time anytime the team, I think they're called the bots, were on stream because they were spamming their little emojis or whatever.
Yeah, well,
that was fun.
Is Brewmaster, Windwalker, and Arms Warrior, right?
Mistweaver, yeah, Brewmaster, Mistweaver,
Oh,
and
sweet.
Arms Warrior. It was like
Right.
the fist weaving monk. Yeah, so
Yeah,
basically
Yes.
tank.
Windwalker monk.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, then you even saw that kind of get put into the NA AWC as well, because I think Cedu tried that out.
Yeah,
Was it into Luminosity? It might have been. I'm not sure, but
I,
definitely into somebody.
I tweeted about this, but I wasn't that big of a fan of the new broadcasting format, like hopping between games. I mean, it was kind of fun, right? But at the same time, I was like, man, I don't want to go to a different game now. Like, we're not even done with this series. I thought that was kind of a weird decision, but maybe there's a better way to execute it. I don't know how you guys felt, but to me, it was just like, as a spectator, it felt like really weird to just go between games so much. I don't know.
I think because the problem is that WoW isn't quite like it is in League of Legends or something like that. It doesn't quite have the staying capacity that I feel like some of those broadcasts have. And I think they're trying to find ways to speed it up so that they can get through these tournaments a bit quicker. And I empathize and I get it. What they should try and do is, and this if you're listening out there, WoW PvP devs or people in charge of esports, you should get multiple broadcasts for these multiple games so that, yeah, okay, you want to do them at two different times, and yeah, you have a main host that's kind of working on everything, but let's get multiple streams up, or kind of like a team sort of based stream where you've got different casters doing these different games, so that we can choose which ones we want to have a look at and which ones we want to watch. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that'd be exciting. And then, yeah, you could get new casters in the mix, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
it would all be good fun.
I think I like the fact that it was lower into the rounds that we saw teams playing on broadcast that you would never ever see unless they were playing on their own streams, which I think was awesome.
Yes.
I get the idea that they were trying, like, that lull time, the whole like map pick, comp pick into the next game, like that is usually about 5 minutes on its own, and with the speed of games right now, you could almost fit another match into that, which made
Yeah.
sense. And I think that was the
Yeah.
idea, but it didn't. I think they started running into some issues where, like, okay, they finished, they want to talk about, do the post recap and talk about that cut scene where it's like the final kill and how that led up to that, and that. And next thing you know, that was actually the first minute of the next game that they were going to hop over to. And so now it's like,
Yeah.
so that conversation got cut short, or they're hopping into a game that's now 35 seconds in. Half the cooldowns have been used because that first initial go has happened, and now you're trying to catch up to what it is. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think the casters did a phenomenal job on it, like immediately picking up and like just like running. Like, oh, the skill level is unbelievable. I hear what you're saying though, is, yeah, jumping back and forth, it feels, that one felt, because it was just happening so fast. I think it felt too choppy. There wasn't that
Yeah.
smooth transition side where you would normally have a bit of that.
Yeah.
I
It's
will
not like golf, like watching
Yeah.
golf, on TV. If you've ever watched golf on TV, it's like they kind of hop between perspectives,
Yeah.
but they keep on one perspective for long enough that you kind of get like a sense of where, how someone is performing. So I
Yep.
think like if they can sort of figure out the pacing maybe a bit better, it would work out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just seemed a bit jarring. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if I quite use the golf though. I can only imagine. Okay, so here's Gordy is lining up.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
already done not so they've hit par the past two holes. You guys didn't see it, but they did, and now they're leading up to yeah.
That I honestly
Hold the
I
pause.
could see you do that. I could see you do that. 100%. That is your new job role, Gareth. So you got to go and do that. Commentate golf, because I can feel that in my soul.
Oh, Brian is picking up the 3-wood at Luminosity Gaming.
Yeah, for sure.
I like the idea though. I thought it was cool they tried something different. There's been a few things that were different throughout all of the AWC this season. There's some new music, there's some new graphics. The difference where now is all of a sudden just two, and they just started rotating people through, I thought was really good, giving it a bit of a break, because I can only imagine how grueling that must have been for some of the casters in the previous seasons, where 60% dampening and a 10-hour day of just sitting there and grinding
Oh,
out casting from start to finish. Like, yeah, I think this is much better for all
I
people
love
involved.
I love the pace of the game right now
Oh
for
yeah,
tournaments.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's such a night and day
So,
difference.
so question: what is your preferred average time for a match to watch as a viewer? Is it 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Let's go
I
for
think it's
eight.
like 3 minutes. I think three from like a playing perspective, three two like three always feels good to me because it's usually that's like one round of cooldowns and dampening is like getting enough that it's starting to get a bit potentially scary. I think once you go past 5 is when the game just feels way too long. Anything over 5 to me feels exceptionally too long. So like 3 to 5 probably is my sweet spot.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
agree as well. Like if you're doing 3 to 5, that means average wise, that means like there some games are like 30 seconds long. Some games are like, maybe 6, 7 minutes. Those long dampening games, depending on which comp you're playing. That to me sounds good. I think you need a meta which isn't too like crazy. Like it isn't too sort of, like I think like this like the meta we have at the minute can be a little bit crazy, especially
Yeah.
with the rogues involved. But if you get in like a thing where it's sort of like, yeah, it could be fast if people play really, really well. And then it could be longer depending on what the play style they're going for. That for me is more exciting. Like I like those sort of games.
Yeah. I kind of go for, I think, 3.5 minute average. 6 minute on the very upside, that's the max, but I think that's more than enough. And then definitely around the 3 minute mark though, it feels just right. Uh, Feeling about just right. This is a horrible transition. How do the hot fixes feel? Do they feel just right?
I think they were good hot fixes in general. I think what were some of the big ones that we had? I think just in general, one of the big ones from at least from February 10th was the fixing the issues of the Precognition not having a bigger cast back. But going back a bit further, I think to some of the other changes that they did,
Well, there's
they
some
buffed
massive,
hunters.
yeah, there were some massive changes for different classes. There's the hunter buff. There's the DK got quite a number of buffs as well.
Yep. Shaman buff, healing surge increased. That you can feel that on Ellie. You can actually. You can definitely top yourself a bit quicker now.
All right.
Some other healing. I mean, it all feels good at the minute. I think realistically speaking, the only thing that people really need is just a bit of a rogue nerf, and I think we're probably in a good place in general.
Yeah. When it comes to like making the tier list, I mean, right now we for melee we only have Acerog in the is the lone S tier melee right now. Like everything else feels like really good, but not like exceptionally good. It's just like Acerog is kind of sticking out. Uh, range is kind of the same story. It seems like balance is actually pretty good for the most part. Minus like I don't know. You can't really even argue. Like nothing for range DPS seems like it's way better than everything else compared to melee, where you just have like this one spec that seems really good.
Yeah,
So
because in S tier you probably put like Ellie, Destro Lock.
we put Ellie and BM Hunter, and then like Arcane Mage with an asterisk.
Yes, yeah,
Because Arcane is like weird, where it's really good at high ratings, but maybe not the best below that. It's one of those specs where in the hands of a really good player, it's really strong, but for an
well, yeah,
average player, it
exactly.
might not be the best. Might not be the
People are
best.
playing all specs, aren't they? They're playing Fire and Frost and Arcane. Like everything seems to
Yeah.
be like workable.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
There's definitely some good balancing there.
Mhm.
Um.
Healers, I think, is where they need to do the most rebalancing. I think that's where
Yeah,
they're struggling with right now.
agreed.
Because I think there's kind of
Yep.
clearly some problems there.
Nerf rogues, buff a couple of the healers, and I think we're good to go.
We're happy. Yep. I agree.
One thing I wanted to highlight out of the hot fixes, I think this one's pretty important. There was an issue with the catalyst or whatever the new catalyst is. I can't remember right now. Where PvP items had the incorrect item level and they're missing. You couldn't put sockets on them, or the socket was disappearing. That So I'm not sure if this is exactly the same thing, but quote unquote, they fixed an issue yesterday where a number of PvP items had the incorrect item level and we're missing socket eligibility. So apparently that's been fixed and it's retroactive. So you just need to relog and you should be able to put a socket on your items now.
Sweet.
So very
Took them a while, but
important.
they got there.
Pardon me?
It took them a while, but they got there.
Yeah, I think they had a bunch of other fixes to deal with, like buffing hunters and shaman. All right, one last one. I know we talked about it a lot right at the beginning of the show. It was still it is a news item. The fact that Holinka put up a wonderful blue post talking about what season 1 PvP rating is at, what the decision was, the fact that. So if anybody's asking, no, there's been no inflation on any of the rated PvP brackets to date. It just started now, along with the fact that they also uncapped Conquest as of today, or sorry, yesterday, depending which time zone you're in. But so any of the rating increases you've been seeing has been solely just on the fact of the number of people playing and the amount of grinding that people have been doing onto the ladder. We will start seeing some inflation added, so people will start floating up higher than where they currently are. So if you've been struggling, you'll start seeing some gains. If you feel that you've capped out, you'll start seeing some gains. And for the people that are concerned because, if that 3K rating and they're not going any higher because that's the ceiling, that as well, it should also start moving. So that said, I think the 3 highlights that were pointed out there was inflation being delayed till week 10. Actually felt a little bit long. So in retrospect, they'll take that knowledge. So next season, they will do it earlier. Don't know what that's going to be. There's a great description about the inflation rate that they use. Typically 10 feels too slow, 20 feels really fast, 15 is kind of where they've normally been doing it. Because they waited so late, they're going to be doing 20. So this is going to start looking and feeling quite rapid. So be prepared for that feels, because that's going to happen. And the other big one is end of season titles are going to be faction agnostic. What does that mean? That means there's not going to be a Horde, Glad, or Rank 1, and an Alliance Rank 1. It's just going to be Rank 1.
Very nice.
Pardon me?
I think that's good.
Very nice. I think that was like kind of, they mentioned in the post that the design was to try to rebalance factions a little bit, and they said it felt successful to them. And now, with cross-faction queuing, it makes sense for them to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, honestly, it made no sense for them to not do it when they did cross-faction queuing, when they did that for PvE.
Yeah, that's a bit weird.
Yep, very true. I think it's a good change.
Yeah. All right. Now, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this. It's a new segment, everybody. Stand by. All right. There you go. Cooldown moment. So what is a cooldown moment? Cooldown moment is a new segment where we've just added, and we are going to talk about one cooldown in the game. It could be pertinent to the current conversation, could be anything really. And we're going to talk about quick little rundown, what it is, what it does, and what you could probably do to get around it or survive, depending on what it is. So as you've alluded before, multitude of times, Jake, it's going to be Stormkeeper. Because, we're talking about Stormkeeper, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. My favorite Legion Aftermath, Legion Borrowed Power that has remained with Elemental Shaman and other Shaman specs, of course. It's a great ability. So just to explain what it is, it's a 1 minute recharge. So you get it every minute. It's a 1.5 second cast time, but you charge yourself with lightning, causing your next 2 lightning bolts to deal 150% more damage, and also cause your next 2 lightning bolts or chain lightnings to be instant cast and trigger an elemental overload on every target. AKA, if you lightning bolt someone, you're guaranteed to have an elemental overload with that. So not only are you doing 150% more damage, you're probably doing another one that's doing like another 120% more damage. Basically, it's a big burst cooldown.
I'm gonna I don't know if the chat will instantly ban me if I post this, but I have a link to the spell. If let me throw it in
Cool.
there, and I'll put it
Great.
in the show notes too. But Jake, keep going.
I'll keep going. I'll keep going. So basically, one of the things I wanted to talk about earlier, and the reason why Stormkeeper is such an amazing ability at the minute, is because of this unique interaction that it has with Surge of Power. And if you don't know what Surge of Power is, it's a talent in which when you use Earthshock, Elemental Blast, or Earthquake, you can enhance your next spell cast within 15 seconds. So as we talked about before for Flame Shock, that puts an additional Flame Shock on another target within 8 yards. But for Lightning Bolt, it causes your next cast to cause an additional 2 elemental overloads. So not only are you doing that 1 elemental overload that's guaranteed, you're getting another 2 on top of that. So as you can tell, that means that when you're Stormkeeper, you're going to be doing a lot of damage, because on whenever you use Earthshock and then Stormkeeper, that's going to be doing, I think, 5 casts guaranteed of lightning bolt, which shreds people. And if that's all doing sort of like 30 to 40k, you're doing upwards of a sort of 150 in sort of like a one global sort of situation. And obviously, if any of those crit, then yeah, you're getting shredded. So you can really 100 to 0 some people. And obviously, we talked about how we have that echo chamber, which increases the damage of elemental overloads. That also buffs that. So you're doing sort of almost 100% of that instead of 85, which I think is a really cool interaction.
That's awesome. So, if I understand this correctly, is you kind of you load up all the players. So they got the flame damage rolling, right?
Yeah.
You get yourself a bunch of maelstrom, so you got that all in the back pocket. So you're ready
Yeah.
to lock and load. You push this button. 1.5. I'm assuming haste reduces the cast time, so depending on your haste, it could be shorter. Pray to God
Mhm.
you don't get kicked on it. And then once it is there, you annihilate somebody.
It can be, yeah. So especially if you use it with the Surge of Power, you can, if you especially if you've got like, if you press that and then you've got an instant cast lava burst, sorry, then there's a high chance that you can one shot people, especially if you've got Sky Fury up and you crit and everything like that. It can really shred people,
Okay.
and that's
So,
just the one charge, because you can do another charge of it afterwards, should you
all right.
wish to, because you got 2 charges.
So how do people play around? How do people make you sad then?
So
How do I play around this and survive?
if you want to live, make sure you're using a damage reduction. If you've got something that's every minute, press that, because it'll kind of mitigate the damage quite significantly. If you're playing with a shaman on your team, grounding totem will absorb the first charge of that entirely
Okay.
before it kills it. So it will kill it. So they'll have another charge, but that will reduce the damage significantly, and it will probably absorb whatever lava burst they send out at the same time as well. So that's a really good way of doing it. Alternatively, you can kite. So you can pretty much root CC kite a shaman when he's got that up, especially if it's in twos. You can pretty much kind of like line of sight them, and it lasts for I think it's 12 seconds that it lasts for. But
Okay.
it's you can kite that out pretty much if you want to. You can root them, cyclone them, whatever you want to do, polymorph them, and that will really annoy them. I'm telling you, it annoys the hell out of me. So that would be my suggestion. I wouldn't bother kicking it, by the way. There's no point doing that, because he'll come back. And I mean, you can delay it if you want to, but I personally don't think there's any point, because it will just get used at some point.
All right.
Might as well mitigate it.
So darkness, AMZ, Dark Pact.
All of the
Uh,
above
what about
at the
spell
same time.
reflection?
Spell
As a
Reflect is great actually for that. Really good, because it reflects the entire thing.
okay.
So yeah, I'd really recommend that. So Spell Reflect is a really good one. Not the Warrior one, the Warlock one. So the Warrior one, it'll eat the first bit of it and then continue. The Warlock one will stay for 3 seconds and reflect all of it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking the warrior one, but I wasn't thinking warlock. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Something ward, dark ward,
Another word.
another
Nether
ward.
Ward, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Mage. I'm assuming ice block.
I wouldn't, to be honest with you, it doesn't need the big the big cooldowns like that. It's only if you've got something like, if you've got like a minute cooldown, then avoid it or try and line of sight it. But it's I
Okay.
wouldn't say it's as scary to the point where you're going to get one shot every single time, but sometimes it will definitely like reduce your damage really low. So if you've got two people on you and the shaman has loaded up Stormkeeper with Sky Fury, then you need to be prepared to line of sight or press something like a mitigating, like a wall or something like that to mitigate that damage cooldown.
Okay. So like blink around the wall or
Mm-hmm.
blink around a pillar, loss it.
Yeah, lost it, sheep
Ooh.
it.
So if you're with a hunter and they drop down the hole, you can still hit things on the other side of the wall or the other side of the pillar. Does that help you?
No, because that sadly doesn't affect me, annoyingly.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right then. So lost it, wallet, runaway, CC.
Respect it is the main
Respect
thing.
it. Okay. Big. You're like the strategist. You probably have something in your back pocket of like some like 5-head, 300 IQ how to deal with this.
Yeah, Stormkeeper, I think just like one of those cooldowns, as Jake said, you just have to respect. It's like it's a buckle up cooldown. It's like, okay, I need to potentially be concerned. If am I low, you want to check your HP. If you're at 30% HP, this shaman pops Stormkeeper. Well, you should be really scared. But if you're at 100% HP, you're probably not that scared of the cooldown. You could probably take both lightning bolts and be fine. But yeah, it's one of those things where you have a little bit of time to react to it, and it really just depends on your HP. And it's nice. I mean, I would recommend anyone plays with weak auras, but it's a good spell to track on weak auras for sure. Especially, as Jake said, it's often used in conjunction with Earth Shock, so you could check for the Primal Surge. What was it called? Primal Surge buff, the Surge of Power buff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can check for that, and it's like, okay, if they have Surge of Power, if they have Stormkeeper down, if they have Sky Fury, put those three together, you're going to have a lot of damage coming. So it's definitely a buckle up. Look at your own HP and get ready to either trade something or try to get topped really quick. And I think that's
Exactly.
the best you can do in many of these situations. Kind of funny, like a lot of cooldowns. Like the name of the game is just respecting it. Like never assume you're 100% safe, and
Yeah.
just be ready. That's what
All
we
right.
want.
I like it. So we're gonna keep doing this. So be prepared for at the next episode what our cooldown moment's going to be. In the meantime, I think I'm going to start with you, Big. Do you have any shout outs? Anybody you want to shout out in the world?
I mean, shout out to Holinka for making that post about inflation, because I think that's a really complicated topic, and I think being very transparent about how it works is a very good thing, because I think a lot of people don't even know it exists, to be honest. And so I think the more there's kind of like this transparency of information, I think the better they'll become at making the best decisions possible for what to do with future inflation rates. So shout
100%.
out Holinka.
I like it, and I don't disagree. Jake, though, do you have anybody you want to shout out?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out all my shaman players, especially those enhancement shaman players who have re-rolled to Ellie this season. I feel for you, but also welcome. And may you continue to play Elemental Shaman even afterwards.
You're such an ass sometimes. Love you, man. I'm going to shout out my wife because she bought me these wonderful LEDs and then helped me set them up. So
LEDs?
LE.
Ele Shaman Ds? No, okay, anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Christmas gifts gone right. All right. Well, that's it for us. Oh, shoot. Big. Do you want to tell people where they can find us?
Oh, absolutely, I do. You can contact us directly with a tweet to @technically_PvP or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Bonus Roll Productions Discord.
And you can also visit the Bonus Roll website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at www.bonusroll.gg. This directory also has a review system, so head over there and tell everyone what you think of your favorite shows, including ours.
Indeed. And I want to remind everybody that links for all of these are going to be in the show notes. I want to thank you all for listening, and we'll chat with you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night.